What's up, everyone? And today I'm bringing a deck profile on my Infernoids. Now, Infernoids is a deck that popped up a couple years ago, kind of just out of nowhere. And honestly, I feel like this is a deck that, depending on how well, this video is being recorded before the March ban list, and it'll probably be uploaded after. So depending on how the format shifts, this deck could actually be seen competitive play. But I've been essentially looking at this deck, and this deck actually has good matchups with some of the top decks currently, which is Drytron, Eldritch, Virtual World, and nevertheless Tri-Brigade. It's also a deck that I've been wanting to build for a long time, but it's not a cheap deck. Let me tell you, the deck is far from cheap. Mainly because like a lot of the Infernoid cards have only had a single printing, like a Decatron only has one printing. The Fusion, which as you can see, like I only have the Japanese one because the actual Fusion itself is like $10, and you want to run 3 because you want Prosperity in this deck. Although honestly, you could probably run less since we run Prosperity now, but Extravagance is also a card. And then there's the Void Imagination, there's a lot of cards that have only had a single print, so unfortunately it does have a little bit of a price range. I'm hoping that this deck gets some more reprints to kind of like help knock the price down, but who knows. And before we get into the video, I'd just like to mention to subscribe to the channel, because less than half of you are subscribed. It's really sad. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. And I hit the camera. First off, I run 3 Infernoid Decatron. Decatron is like the best monster in this deck, because it is the only monster that can be normal summoned. The rest of the Infernoid monsters cannot be normal summoned. They have to be special summoned by banishing Infernoids. When this card is normal summoned, it becomes a foolish burial for your Infernoids. Pronounce that kind of weird. Infernoids. I think I said like Infernoids or something like that. Don't know how that happened, but it becomes a foolish burial for the Infernoids. And if you do increase this card's level by the level of the sent monster, and if you do this card name, it becomes that monster's and replaces the effect with that monster's original effect. So this is literally 3 copies of any card in your deck. It's clear to see why this is really good. It's also a tuner and a level 1. So it's got 1-for-1 synergy. You can use it in synchro plays. You got all sorts of options with this. This is just a really good card. Next, I run the 3 Infernoid Devite. Now, this one cannot be normal. Summon must be special summoned by banishing 3 Infernoid monsters from hand or graveyard, while the total levels and ranks of all effect monsters you control are 8 or lower. When this card is special summoned, you can destroy all spells and traps on the field except void cards. So it destroys your opponent's spells and traps, but doesn't destroy your spells and traps, which is good. And given the current format, that's a really card. So I'd say this is the card you're going to be wanting to go into most right now. When another monster's effect is activated, quick effect, you trigger 1 monster to negate the activation, and if you do, banish it. So let's say you have multiple Infernoids on the field. Let's say you have multiple Debutantes too, because this is only a soft once per turn, not a hard once per turn, which is the one thing with the Infernoids. They're only soft once per turn. Then the Decatron's not a once per turn at all. So you get a lot of negations through the Devite, which is pretty good. Next, I run the 3 Infernoid Onuku. Same with Devite, cannot be normal summon, must be special summoned by banishing 3 Infernoid monsters from hand or grave. When this card is special summoned, you can destroy all other monsters on the field, while Devite is more like a Featherstorm, or not Featherstorm, Storm Duster, Harvey's Featherstorm. I'm blanking on the name. I keep getting those two confused. But Onuku is essentially a Raigeki. Although, during either player's turn, when a spell trap card's effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster to negate the activation if you do banish that card. So this can negate spells and traps. This negates monster effects, this negates spell and traps. I also run the 1 Infernoid Atondel. Atondel can be special summoned by banishing 2 instead of 3. And when this card destroys an opponent monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can activate this effect. This card can make a second attack in a row. And once per turn during either player's turn, you contribute 1 monster, then target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. That's essentially most of the Infernoids. They're literally DD Crows. Again, that's a card that's really good in this format. Next, I run the 2 Sitesmas. I think I pronounced that correctly. I don't know. Must be special summoned by banishing 2 Infernoid monsters from your hand or grave. And if this card attacks an opponent's monster, this effect to be activated at the end of the battle phase. Banish 1 card on the field. Once per turn during next player's turn, tribute 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, or target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard. Banish it. I also run the 2 Natra. Natra actually has some synergy with another monster you run in this deck called Laval Golem. Natra can essentially bounce one of your opponent's cards back to their hand. That's such like Lava Golem. Lava Golem is summoned to your opponent's field. When you bounce it back, it goes back to your hand, and you can use it again. So originally I had this at 1, but once I started learning that whole combo, I decided to bump it up to 2. I also run the 1 Infernoid Harmdic. This one can be special summoned by banishing 1 Infernoid monster, same with the Natra, as well as the next 2, I believe. Target 1 monster on the field, destroy it, and this card cannot attack the turn to activate this effect, and once per turn during your opponent's turn, you contribute 1 monster, then target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. This is a quick effect. So this one's definitely good to have during your opponent's turn. Also run the 1 Petrulia, and the 1 Sageti Petrulia. You can target a spell and trap on the field, destroy it, and then this card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect, and once per turn during your opponent's turn, you contribute 1 monster, target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. It's a quick effect. Same as Harmadic. And Sagete, you can banish 1 monster from your opponent's extra deck, their choice. And that's when this card declares an attack. You can banish a monster from your opponent's extra deck, although they get to choose that, unfortunately. If we could choose that, that'd be broken. Once per turn during either player's turn, you contribute 1 monster, target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. And we also run the 3 Lava Golem. Now, this is essentially kind of like the hand trap-ish of choice. Mainly because all the other hand traps can be normal summoned. This cannot be. And since you run stuff like Reasoning and Monster Gate, you want something that cannot be normal summoned. Because you don't want to special summon this to your field. You want to special summon it to your opponent's field and breaking their board. Next, I run 3 Void Imagination. I actually ordered an additional 2 along with this copy, but they never arrived, which was sad. Void Imagination is essentially your fusion for the deck, and if your opponent controls monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, you can send up to 6 monsters from your deck as fusion materials, which is really good. So this becomes like a Shaddoll fusion essentially. I also run the 3 Void Banishment. Void Banishment is your spell and trap searcher, essentially, as well as having some sort of battle effect, which isn't really all that important. You mainly want it for the searching of your Void Imagination or your Void Feast. I also run 3 Layer of Darkness. If you all face-up monsters on the field become dark, and once per turn, if you attribute a monster you control to activate a card effect, you contribute 1 dark monster your opponent controls, even though you did not control it. So that's insane. So like let's say your opponent controls a few monsters. You activate this, they all become dark. Let's say I want to activate the effect of Sight Mass. I contribute 1 card my opponent controls instead of attributing Sight Mass. That's really good. And it also can, once per turn during the end phase, special summon as many Torment tokens as possible to the turn player's field in defense position up to the number of monsters attributed this turn while this card was face up. And I also run the 1 Terraforming. Actually, in practice, I did not get that once. I did not open a copy of Lair of Darkness or Terraforming, which was odd, but okay. I run 3 Pot of Prosperity. Technically, 2 of these are Extravagance, but I only have 1 Prosperity. I figured, just kind of use them as like for Prosperity. Prosperity is better than Extravagance because that way you don't accidentally banish all 3 of your Tiara, because you don't want to banish that. I also run the 1 Reasoning, since you have a lot of high-level monsters. I also run the 3 Monster Gate. There's only 1 card in this deck that can be normal summoned, and that is Decatron. So by using this, you essentially guarantee yourself a Decatron, because you're just going to keep going until you get it, and you can just use the effects. Then you have all those Infernoids in the grave. So it's pretty good. It's a pretty cool deck. Pretty cool card. Also run the 1 1-for-1 since Decatron is a level 1. The 1 Metal Foes Fusion. Now I mainly run this because you do a lot of milling with the Monster Gate, and if you can get this to a grave, hey, it's a free draw card. Why wouldn't you run it? Lastly, for the traps, I run the 1 Void Piece. Just send 1 Void spell card from your hand or face-up field to the grave. Special summon up to 3 Infernoid monsters from your deck whose levels equal exactly 8, ignoring their summoning conditions. Moving on to the extra deck. I run the 3 Tiara. Tiara must be fusion summoned by using 1 Onoko, 1 Devotee, and 1 or more Infernoid monsters, so you can use as many as you want. So when this card is fusion summoned, you can apply these effects in a sequence depending on the number of fusion materials with different names used for this card summoned. 3 or more, each player sends 3 cards from their extra deck to your graveyard, which is the effect you mainly want, shown in a bit. 5 or more, each player sends the top 3 cards from their deck to the grave. 8 or more, each player returns up to 3 of their banished cards to the graveyard. 10 or more, each player sends their entire hand to the grave. Potential droll option. Like if you have Droll and Lockbird, outside Droll and Lockbird. Like some things outside in this would be Droll, Super Poly, Dark Ruler no more. Dark Ruler was actually one I was thinking about maining, but I just could not figure out what to take out for it. Also run 3 Elder Entity and a Test. When this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target a card on the field, destroy it. That's the only reason why you run it. And I only have 2 copies, but you do want to run 3. I run 1 Starving Venom and 1 Shadal for Super Poly plays because I had room in the extra deck. The 1 Omega for the same reason I had a test that when it's sent to the grave, you can destroy a card. I run 2 Beat Cop from the Underworld since when you have Lair of Darkness, all your monsters become dark. The 1 Cross Shape because when you fuse summon, you can special level 4 from grave, but you're not going to be using that too much because only 1 card can be brought out with it, and that'd be Decatron. The 1 Crusader Equimax, the 1 Apollousa, and the 1 Access Code Talker to round out the deck. Let me know, what do you think of the Infernoids? Do you think it's a pretty cool deck? Do you think it actually has competitive potential, can be potentially competitive? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video I make. Bye.